Plasma fire scorched through her ship's hull like liquid death. Commander Zephora of the Catherian Deep Strike Corps felt the deck plates buckle beneath her boots. Alarms shrieked in harmonics that made her cranial ridges ache. Emergency. Lighting bathed the bridge in hellish crimson as her reconnaissance vessel, the Shadow's Edge, died around her. Hull breach in sectors 4 through 7, her navigation officer, Kess, reported with mechanical precision even as purple blood trickled from a gash across his temple, atmospheric pressure dropping. Engine core is critical. Zephora gripped her command throne, feeling the familiar weight of her ceremonial blade against her hip, useless, now against the human orbital defense platforms that had torn her ship apart. They had been expecting her mission. Somehow impossibly, they had known. Time to impact, she demanded, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her as a high-caste warrior. 90 seconds, Kess replied, then looked at her with those pale silver eyes that had seen too many battles. Commander, the escape pods are compromised, Zephora finished. The tactical display showed what remained of her crew's life signs 5. Souls out of 30, scattered across a ship that was now little more than a falling coffin. Prepare for emergency landing. Signal command that Deep Reconnaissance Mission 77 Alpha has failed. The ship shuddered again, artificial gravity flickering. Through the cracked viewport, she could see the blue-white marble of Earth. Growing larger, its surface wreathed in the smoke trails of ongoing bombardments. Somewhere below, human cities burned under Catherian siege weapons. Somewhere below, her people's invasion force carved its bloody path toward total conquest. And now she would join the carnage. Not as a proud commander leading from orbit, but as crashed prey in enemy territory. Commander Kess whispered, his breathing labored. A piece of shrapnel protruded from his chest, dark fluid seeping around the edges. The humans. How did they know our approach vector? It was a good question. Catherian stealth technology had been perfected over centuries of warfare among the stars. Their ships moved like ghosts through the void, undetectable until they chose to strike. But the human defense grid had targeted them with impossible precision, as if they had been waiting at exactly the right coordinates. I don't know, she admitted, watching the planet's surface rush toward them. Cities sprawled like bacterial colonies across the continents, connected by the bright threads of transport networks. Here and there, mushroom clouds bloomed, where Catherian orbital strikes had found their mark. But when we survive this, we'll find out. The ship's AI, speaking in the cold musical tones of her homeworld, announced their imminent impact. Zephora closed her eyes, feeling the ceremonial scars along her cheeks burn with phantom, pain marks of honor carved there when she first earned her command. She thought of the crystal spires of Kyrathi Prime, of the war colleges where she had learned to kill with elegant precision, of the countless worlds she had helped bring under Dominion rule. She did not think she would see any of them again. Shadow's Edge struck Earth with the force of a falling mountain. Metal shrieked and twisted. The command deck folded inward like paper. Zephora felt herself flying, her body ragged a limp in the sudden chaos of impact. She struck something hard, a bulkhead maybe, or the remains of her throne-and felt ribs. Crack with sharp pops that sent fire through her torso. Darkness took her. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. The taste of copper and ozone, the weight of twisted metal pressing against her legs, the sound of fires crackling somewhere in the wreckage, punctuated by the distant pop of small arms fire. Human voices speaking in their crude, angular language. Drawing closer, Zephora tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her chest, white-hot and stunning. Her right arm hung at an odd angle, and she could feel the warm wetness of blood seeping through her tactical armor. The bioluminescent patterns etched into the carapace flickered weakly. Barely visible through the smoke and debris, she was trapped. Pinned beneath what remained of the command console. Hidden in a pocket of twisted metal that had somehow preserved a small bubble of breathable atmosphere. Through a gap in the wreckage, she could see part of the main corridor, lit by the orange glow of electrical fires. Footsteps echoed on buckled deck plates. Human voices, sharp with adrenaline, sweep every compartment, someone ordered and accented. Galactic standard. Command wants confirmation on casualties. No survivors, no prisoners. Copy that, Sergeant. Checking the bridge section now. Zephyra held her breath, watching shadows move across the gap in her metal tomb. 3 humans in mottled camouflage, carrying projectile weapons that looked crude but undoubtedly effective. They moved with the careful precision of trained soldiers, checking corners, scanning for threats. One of them paused directly in front of her hiding spot. She could see his face clearly young, maybe 20 standard years. With the pale skin and dark hair common to this world's northern regions, his eyes swept over the wreckage. Lingering for a moment on the twisted console that concealed her, Zephyra's hand moved slowly to the combat knife sheathed at her thigh. If they found her, she would at least take one with her. The warrior's death? Blade in hand was better than capture and interrogation, but the human moved on. Following his companions deeper into the ship, their voices faded, leaving only the crackle of flames and the occasional groan of settling metal. Hours passed. Or perhaps minutes' time became fluid in the dark, measured only by the steady throb of pain in her chest and the growing weakness. In her limbs, the bioluminescent tattoos that marked her warrior caste had dimmed to barely visible threads of light beneath her skin. Her body's natural regenerative systems were failing, overwhelmed by the extent of her injuries. She was dying. The realization brought neither fear nor regret, only a strange sense of completion. She had served the Dominion with honor. Her death would be noted in the war colleges, her name added to the long lists of those who had fallen in the Great Expansion. Perhaps some young warrior decades hence would study her final mission and learn from her failures. Her eyes drifted closed, and she felt herself beginning to slip away into the peaceful darkness that waited beyond pain. Beyond duty, beyond the endless hunger for conquest that drove her people among the stars. The sound of approaching footsteps brought her back. These were different from the soldiers who had searched earlier. Quieter, more careful. A single person, moving with the deliberate caution of someone who knew they shouldn't be there. Light spilled through the gap in her prison, not the harsh white beam of a tactical flashlight, but the softer glow of a handheld illuminator. Tensed, forcing her good hand to tighten around the knife handle. Jesus Christ, a voice whispered in the human tongue. Male, she thought, with the accent of the southern continental regions. What a mess. Light played across the wreckage, pausing on the scattered remains of her crew. She could see Kess's body sprawled near what had been the navigation station, his silver blood pooling beneath him in the weak gravity. The human's light lingered there for a long moment. Poor bastards, the voice murmured. Whatever you were, you didn't deserve this. The light moved on, sweeping across her hiding place. For a moment she thought it would pass by, that she would remain hidden until death finally claimed her. Then the beam stopped, focused directly on the gap where her face was visible in the shadows. Human and Catherian stared at each other across 3 feet of twisted metal in the unbridgeable gulf of species hatred. The human was older than the soldiers who had searched before, maybe 40 years, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of long experience with violence and loss. He wore civilian clothes beneath a battered medical vest, and the device in his hand was a scanner, not a weapon. They looked at each other for what felt like an eternity. Zephyra waited for him to call out, to summon the soldiers who would drag her from her hiding place and put a bullet through her head. Instead, he whispered a single word in his own language. Shit. Then he was moving, setting down the scanner and pulling at the twisted metal that trapped her. His hands were strong, despite their obvious trembling, guided by what looked like medical training as he checked the stability of the wreckage before trying to extract her. Easy, he murmured, speaking now in heavily accented Galactic standard. Don't move, I've got you. She wanted to fight, to drive her blade between his ribs and die as a warrior should. But her body betrayed her, too weak and broken to do more than watch as he carefully shifted debris and freed her from her metal prison. When he finally pulled her clear, she collapsed against him, unable to support her own weight. His arms encircled her, surprisingly gentle, and she caught the scent of antiseptic and human sweat that clung to his clothes. My name is Marcus, he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the crackling fires. "I'm going to get you out of here." She tried to speak, to demand answers, to curse him for his inexplicable mercy. But darkness was rising again, and the last thing she remembered was the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her cheek as he carried her away from the wreckage of everything she had ever known. When she woke again, the world had changed completely. Consciousness returned like a tide washing over broken glass sharp, disorienting, and accompanied by the antiseptic smell that meant medical intervention. Zephyr's eyes opened to unfamiliar ceiling panels, human-made and poorly maintained. With water stains bleeding through the synthetic material like old wounds, her body felt wrong, not just injured, but altered. The deep ache in her ribs had been muted to a dull throb, and when she tried to move her arm, she found it immobilized in some kind of primitive human splint. Her tactical armor was gone, replaced by loose fitting civilian clothes that smelled of industrial detergent. "You're awake?" The voice came from her left, calm and professional. Marcus sat in a metal chair beside what appeared to be a medical cot, his hands folded in his lap. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his clothes were different now, clean scrubs instead of the blood-stained civilian outfit. She remembered from the crash site. She tried to sit up and immediately discovered the restraints. Soft, synthetic straps held her wrists to the bed frame, loose enough to allow some movement but tight enough to prevent her from reaching any potential weapons. Her warrior instincts flared, and she tested the bonds with a sharp jerk that sent pain shooting through her injured arm. "Sorry about those," Marcus said, not sounding particularly sorry. "But you were delirious for about 6 hours, and you kept trying to strangle me. Had to sedate you twice." "Where am I?" Her voice came out as a rasp, throat raw from whatever chemicals he had pumped into her system. The room was small and windowless. Carved from what looked like natural rock, few pieces of jury-rigged medical equipment hummed quietly in the corners, connected by exposed cables that spoke of hasty installation. "Underground," Marcus replied. "What?" "Old mining complex about 40 kilometers from where your ship came down. It's been converted into a medical facility for people who can't go to regular hospitals." She studied his face, looking for deception. Humans were notoriously poor liars. Their facial expressions betrayed them constantly. But Marcus seemed genuinely tired rather than duplicitous, worn down by whatever circumstances had brought him to this hidden place. Why? The question encompassed everything. Why save her? Why risk himself? Why not simply let her die with the rest of her crew? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the medical readouts flickering on a nearby screen. "Because I took an oath once," he said finally. "First, do no harm." Seemed like a good principle, even in the middle of a war. "I am your enemy." She spoke the words carefully, testing his reaction. "My people have killed thousands of yours. I would have done the same, given the chance, probably." He leaned back in his chair, looking older than his years. "But you weren't given the chance." "Don't. You were dying, trapped in the wreckage. Killing helpless people isn't medicine, it's murder." She flexed her fingers, feeling the strength slowly returning to her limbs. The restraints were human-made, designed for human physiology. Given time and full mobility, she could probably break them. "Your commanders will not agree with your philosophy." "My commanders are dead." The words carried a weight of old grief. "Orbital strike took out our field hospital 3 weeks ago. 67 medical personnel, 200 wounded. Turns out your people don't recognize the symbol of the Red Cross." Guilt was not an emotion Zephyra was familiar with, but something uncomfortable stirred in her chest. The Dominion's rules of engagement were clear. Medical facilities were legitimate targets if they served military personnel. Civilian casualties were simply the cost of efficient conquest. "That is war," she said, though the words felt hollow. "It is." Marcus stood, moving to check the IV line that snaked into her uninjured arm. "But this isn't a battlefield. You're not a threat right now, so the war can wait." Through the thin walls, she could hear distant sounds, footsteps in corridors, muffled voices, the hum of machinery. "Others know I am here?" "A few. Tobias, he runs the electronics. couple of the nurses. They think you're a human pilot we pulled from a downed transport. Marcus adjusted something on the foredrip, and she felt a slight warming sensation in her veins. Your biosignatures are close enough to pass casual inspection, especially with the injuries. And when they discover the truth, then we'll deal with it. He returned to his chair, studying her with those dark, human eyes. How much do you know about human physiology? The change of subject caught her off guard, enough to kill efficiently, but not enough to know that your species and mine are remarkably similar. Bone density, muscle structure, cardiovascular systems, almost identical, as if we evolved from related stock. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Makes you wonder, doesn't it, Dade? Though she would not admit it. Cytherian xenobiologists had noted the similarities when the first surveys of Earth were completed. Most dismissed it as convergent evolution, the tendency for similar environments to produce similar life forms. But there had been whispers, theories that suggested something more deliberate. What do you want from me? She asked. Right now. To keep you alive long enough to figure out how to get you out of here without getting both of us killed? Marcus rubbed his eyes, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. Longer term, ... I don't know. Maybe some answers. Your people appeared out of nowhere 6 months ago and started glassing our cities. No attempts at communication, no demands, no warning, just death from the sky. She could have told him about the long surveys, the careful cataloging of human civilization, the Dominion's conclusion that this world's inhabitants were too primitive and chaotic to be permitted continued existence. She could have explained the doctrine of preemptive conquest, the belief that any species capable of eventually developing interstellar travel was a potential threat to be eliminated, while still contained to their birth world. Instead, she said nothing. Marcus seemed to understand her silence. That's what I thought. Well, at least you're honest about it. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, accompanied by voices speaking in rapid human dialects. Marcus tensed, moving quickly to a cabinet where he withdrew a small device that he clipped to his collar. Translation matrix, he explained quietly. If someone comes in, let me do the talking. Try to look human. The door opened with a soft hiss of hydraulics. A woman entered, middle-aged, with the efficient bearing of someone accustomed to crisis management. She wore medical scrubs similar to Marcus's, but her hands were stained with what looked like engine grease. Marcus, we need you in surgery. 3, she said without preamble. Tobias found another survivor from the transport crash. Human male, severe internal bleeding, on my way. Marcus stood, then glanced back at Zephora. Dr. Reeves, this is ... Alina, the pilot I mentioned. Still recovering from head trauma, so she might not be very responsive. The woman Reeves gave Zephora a cursory examination with experienced eyes. Concussion? Among other things. I've got her on neural stabilizers for the next 12 hours. Marcus moved toward the door. Can you keep an eye on her while I'm in surgery, sure? Though we're running low on beds if more casualties come in. She'll be mobile soon, maybe another day or two. They left together, and Zephora found herself alone in the small medical chamber. The translation device, Marcus, had activated still functioned. She realized she had understood every word of their conversation without conscious effort. Interesting technology for such a primitive species. She tested the restraints again, more carefully this time. The synthetic material was strong but not beyond her capabilities. The question was whether breaking free would serve any purpose. She was deep underground in hostile territory, surrounded by humans who would kill her the moment they discovered her true identity. Even if she could fight her way to the surface, she was 40 kilometers from the crash site with no way to contact Dominion forces for now. Survival meant playing the role Marcus had assigned her, the injured human pilot, dependent on his protection, grateful for his mercy. It went against every instinct of her warrior training, but she had learned to be pragmatic as well as fierce. She closed her eyes and began to plan. When Marcus returned 2 hours later, she was ready with questions. The survivor from the transport, she said as he checked her medical readings. Did he live? Barely. Lost a lot of blood. Marcus looked exhausted, surgical mask hanging loose around his neck. What made you ask? In my delirium, I thought I heard other voices. Other injured. She watched his face carefully. How many others are here? 15 patients, maybe 20 staff. It's a small operation. He moved to the IV stand, adjusting the flow rate. Most of the serious cases get moved topside once they're stable. We're more of a ... way station. For people who cannot go to regular hospitals, resistance fighters mostly. People on the wrong side of the occupation government. Deserters from both armies. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. War makes refugees of everyone, eventually. She filed that information away. A resistance medical facility hidden underground, treating people who could not seek official medical care. Valuable intelligence, if she ever found a way to transmit. When will you remove the restraints, she asked. When I'm sure you won't try to kill me. Marcus studied her face. You've been unconscious for most of the last day, but your body language suggests combat training, military bearing even. Injured. Alina, the transport pilot, wouldn't move like that. By the third day, Sphora had memorized the layout of the underground complex and identified 17 potential escape routes. 12 led deeper into the mining tunnels, useful for hiding, but ultimately dead ends. 3 connected to surface. Access points that were heavily guarded and monitored, to lead to what appeared to be old storm drainage systems that might provide undetected passage to the outside world. She had also cataloged the medical facility's defenses, which were considerable. Despite the staff's civilian appearance, motion sensors at key intersections, pressure plates in the main corridors. At least 6 individuals who moved with the unconscious discipline of military training, despite wearing medical scrubs. This was not simply a hospital, it was a fortified command post disguised as a humanitarian operation. Marcus had not returned since their conversation about theoretical commanders and practical survival. In his absence, she had been cared for by a rotating staff of nurses and technicians who treated her with professional courtesy and asked no probing questions. The fiction of Alina, the transport pilot, seemed to be holding, but she could feel the weight of observation, the subtle signs that her movements were being tracked and analyzed. Someone was watching her, and she suspected it was not Marcus. On the morning of the 4th day, her suspicions were confirmed. She was performing flexibility exercises in her small room. Carefully designed movements that would restore her combat readiness without appearing overtly martial. When the door chimed and opened to admit a woman she had not seen before, tall, athletic, with the kind of controlled grace that spoke of extensive combat training, her hair was pulled back in a functional ponytail, and her medical scrubs were too clean, too perfectly fitted. Most tellingly, her eyes never stopped moving, constantly scanning for threats with the hypervigilance of a career soldier. Alina? The woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Zephora could not immediately place. I'm Dr. Petrov. Marcus asked me to check on your progress. Of course, Zephora lowered herself back onto the cot, careful to appear weaker than she actually felt. How is he? I have not seen him recently. Busy with other patients. You know how it is. Petrov approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being obeyed. She carried a medical scanner, but her attention was focused on Zephyr's face rather than the readouts. May I ask you a few questions about your injuries? Certainly. You were found in the wreckage of a transport that crashed near Sector 7. Severe trauma to your right arm, multiple rib fractures, possible concussion. Petrov activated the scanner and began a slow sweep of Zephyr's torso. It's quite remarkable that you survived the impact. I was fortunate indeed, especially considering that the transport in question was carrying military supplies to a forward base that fell to Catharian forces 2 weeks ago. Petrov's voice remained conversational, but her eyes had gone flat and cold. No passenger manifest listed anyone named Alina. Zephyra felt her muscles tense despite her efforts to remain relaxed. The medical scanner was active, but she suspected it was recording more than just her vital signs. Perhaps the records were incomplete or destroyed in the crash. Perhaps Petrov completed her scan and stepped back, hands clasped behind her back in a posture that put her within easy reach. of whatever weapons she carried beneath the medical scrubs. Or perhaps Alina is not your real name. The pretense was crumbling. Sephora calculated distances and angles, identifying the woman's likely reaction patterns if this conversation turned violent. Sephora was trained and alert, but she was also standing too close, overconfident in her ability to control the situation. I am not certain what you are implying, Zephra said carefully. I'm implying that Marcus has been harboring an enemy combatant for the past 4 days. One whose bioscan results show physiological markers consistent with Catherian military enhancement. Petrov's hand moved slightly, settling near what was probably a concealed sidearm. Would you care to explain that? There were several options available. Sephora could continue the deception, hoping to maintain her cover long enough to find Anne. Escape route. She could attempt to overpower Petrov before the woman could draw her weapon. Or she could abandon subterfuge entirely and negotiate from a position of acknowledged strength. The choice was made for her when the door chimed again and Marcus entered. Carrying a meal tray and wearing an expression of resigned exasperation, "Petrov," he said without preamble, "I believe I asked you to wait for my return before conducting this interview." The patient was awake and responsive. I saw no reason to delay. Petrov did not turn away from Zephra, but her stance shifted, slightly, to keep both of them in her peripheral vision, especially given what the bioscans revealed. Marcus set the meal tray aside and moved to stand between them, his body language deliberately casual, but positioned to intervene if violence erupted. And what exactly did they reveal? Enhanced bone density, redundant cardiovascular systems, neural pathways consistent with combat conditioning. Petrov's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had uncovered a significant deception. She's Catherian, Marcus. Probably military. Possibly special forces. I know, Marcus said quietly. The admission hung in the air between them like an unexploded bomb. Petrov's eyes widened slightly, her hand moving closer to her concealed weapon. Sephora felt the careful balance of the last 4 days shifting toward inevitable violence. You know? Petrov's voice was deadly calm. You've been treating an enemy commander for 4 days, and you know? I've been treating a patient who was dying, Marcus corrected. Her species was irrelevant to that diagnosis. Species is the reason 3 of our forward bases have been overrun in the last month. The reason orbital strikes are targeting our supply convoys with impossible accuracy. Petrov's control was slipping, anger bleeding through the professional facade. She's a reconnaissance specialist, Marcus. Everything she's seen here, our location, our numbers, our capabilities, she'll report back to her superiors. Will you? Marcus asked, turning to look directly at Zephra. Report back to your superiors. It was a fair question, and one she had been wrestling with since regaining consciousness in this place. Duty demanded that she gather whatever intelligence she could and find a way to transmit it to Dominion forces. But duty also required pragmatic assessment of costs and benefits, and the value of this single facility was questionable compared to the risk of exposure. That would depend, she said finally, on whether I have superiors left to report to. Both humans looked at her sharply. Marcus moved closer, his medical instincts overriding tactical caution. What do you mean? My ship was detected and destroyed before completing its mission. Ow. My crew is dead. If Command believed our intelligence was critical, they would have sent additional reconnaissance assets. Zephora shifted position slightly, testing the range of motion in her injured arm. The most likely explanation is that they consider this sector unimportant, or that they have already written it off as a loss. You're saying you've been abandoned? Petrov's skepticism was evident. I am saying that the strategic value of a single underground medical facility is probably insufficient to justify risking another deep strike vessel. Zephora met the woman's gaze steadily. Military pragmatism is not unique to humans. Was studying her with the intensity he usually reserved for complex medical procedures, and if you could contact them, there was a way to call for extraction? The question probed deeper than surface tactics, reaching toward fundamental choices. About loyalty and survival, Zephora considered her answer carefully. 6 months ago, I would have called without hesitation. But 6 months ago, I had not seen humans care for their wounded without regard for military value. I had not met a surgeon who would risk his life to save an enemy. She paused, aware that her next words would irrevocably commit her to a course of action. Circumstances change, priorities change. That's not an answer, Petrov said harshly. It is the only answer I can give. Zefra looked between them, seeing the tension that stretched like a wire about to snap. You want certainty, guarantees, but war is uncertainty. All we can do is choose moment by moment whether to show mercy or to kill. Marcus nodded slowly, as if her words confirmed something he had suspected. Petrov looked less convinced, her hand still hovering near her weapon. So what now? The woman asked. We just trust her? Hope that Catharian military honor means something in practice. You do what we've been doing, Marcus said. Treat her injuries, help her recover, and then we figure out how to get her safely away from here. And if she betrays us, then we deal with that when it happens. Marcus moved to the medical cabinet, withdrawing a fresh set of bandages. But right now, she's a patient who needs care. That's all I need to know. Petrov was quiet for a long moment, her soldier's instincts warring with whatever respect she had for Marcus's judgment. Finally, she stepped back, though her posture remained alert. I'll be monitoring the situation, she said. Any change in status, any suspicious behavior, and we'll need to reevaluate. Understood. Marcus began unwrapping the old bandages from Zephyr's arm, his movements gentle and professional. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you could update the staff. Elena's real identity should remain classified, but they need to know she. The deeper levels of the mining complex told a different story than the medical facility above. Here, the pretense of humanitarian neutrality gave way to something that looked disturbingly like a military command center. Zafira followed Marcus through corridors lined with communications equipment, tactical displays showing troop movements across 3 continents, and weapon racks that held everything from human projectile rifles to captured Catharian energy weapons. Impressive, she murmured, pausing before a bank of monitors that displayed real-time satellite feeds. This is not a simple medical station, no, Marcus agreed. It's not. But then you already knew that. God. They had been walking for 20 minutes, through progressively more secure sections of the complex. Each checkpoint required biometric verification. And Zephora had noticed the subtle signs of automated defenses, weapon emplacements disguised as ventilation systems, force field generators built into doorframes, sensors that tracked everything. From body temperature to neural activity, resistance is more organized than Dominion intelligence suggested, she observed. We've had good teachers. Marcus stopped before a heavy blast door marked with symbols she recognized as human warning. Signs. Some of them even Catharian. Before she could ask what he meant, the door cycled open to reveal a large chamber that had clearly been excavated specifically for its current purpose. Banks of computers lined the walls, tended by technicians who worked with the focused intensity of people operating under constant time pressure. In the center of the room, a massive holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the local planetary region, with icons representing human and Catharian forces moving in complex patterns. But what drew Zephyr's attention immediately was the figure standing before the main display, elegant, with the distinctive cranial ridges and bioluminescent markings that identified her as not only Catharian, but high-caste military nobility. The woman turned as they entered, and Zephyr felt a shock of recognition that went beyond mere species identification. The scarred face, the ceremonial tattoos that marked her as a former fleet commander, the way she carried herself despite wearing human civilian clothes. This was Nyx Vastal, hero of the border wars, architect of 3 successful planetary conquests, and according to official Dominion records, dead for the past 2 years. Commander Zephora, Nyx said in perfect Catharian, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of formal address. It has been some time since we served together. Fleet Commander Vastal. Zephora responded automatically with the traditional gesture of respect, though her mind raced with implications. You are supposed to be dead. Officially, I am. Seemed preferable to the alternative. Nyx moved closer, her movements carrying the predatory grace that marked all successful Catharian officers. You look well, considering your recent ordeal. Well enough. Zephora glanced around the command center, noting how the human technicians continued their work despite the tension between the two Catharians. "May I ask what you are doing here?" "The same thing you are, I suspect, learning that our people's version of this war is ... incomplete." Nix gestured toward the holographic display, where red and blue icons showed the current disposition of forces. "Tell me, Commander, in your pre-mission briefings, were you informed that human resistance forces had acquired functional Catharian technology?" Zephyrus studied the display more carefully. Several of the blue icons representing human forces showed equipment designations that she recognized as Dominion military hardware, not just captured weapons, but integrated systems that required extensive technical knowledge to operate. "No," she said slowly, "that was not in our intelligence reports. Nor were you told that human forces have been conducting successful raids against our supply convoys using Catharian stealth technology, or that they have managed to decrypt our communications protocols on at least 7 occasions. Nix's voice carried a bitter edge. "There is a great deal that Command has chosen not to share with field operatives." Marcus had been listening quietly, but now he stepped forward. "Show her the rest, Nix. She needs to see everything." Nix manipulated the holographic controls, and the display shifted to show what appeared to be a timeline stretching back several months. Icons representing military actions appeared in chronological order, with detailed annotations that made Zephyr's blood run cold. "The attack on Kepler Station," Nix said, indicating a cluster of red icons. "Official reports credited your success to superior Catharian tactics and technology. The truth is that human forces withdrew deliberately, abandoning a secondary facility in order to preserve their primary shipyard. That is impossible. Our intelligence confirmed the station's strategic value. Your intelligence was fed information by human operatives who wanted you to attack that particular target." Nix highlighted another section of the timeline. "Same pattern appears in 6 other major engagements. Battles that Dominion forces won by attacking objectives that the humans were prepared to sacrifice." Zephyrus felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. "You are suggesting that we have been manipulated. I am stating it as fact." Nix's bioluminescent markings flared with barely controlled anger. "This entire war has been a carefully orchestrated deception, designed to bleed both sides while serving the interests of a third party." "What third party?" Marcus answered that question. "The Meridian Syndicate. Corporate entities on both sides who profit from extended conflict. They've been playing human and Catharian forces against each other while selling weapons and intelligence to whoever pays the highest price." The holographic display shifted again, showing a complex web of financial transactions and resource flows. Companies with innocuous names moving vast quantities of military hardware between supposedly opposing forces. Communication intercepts showing coordination between human and Catharian black market networks. Patterns of deliberate escalation, designed to prevent any possibility of negotiated peace. "How long have you known this?" Zephyrus asked. "About 6 months," Marcus replied. Nix figured it out first when she started noticing discrepancies in Dominion supply manifests. Weapons that should have been going to frontline units were being diverted to unknown buyers. Intelligence reports that contradicted observable human behavior patterns. "So you defected." "I chose truth over orders," Nix said firmly. "When I brought my concerns to Fleet Command, I was informed that my services were no longer required. Permanently." Zephyrus understood the euphemism. Command had ordered Nix's execution to prevent her from spreading inconvenient truths. Somehow, she had escaped and made her way here, to this hidden facility where humans and rogue Catharians worked together to uncover the real enemy. "And now?" Zephyrus asked. "What is your objective?" "To end the war," Marcus said simply. "Dolph. Sides have been fed lies, manipulated into fighting each other while the real enemy grows stronger. We need to expose the truth, break the cycle of deception, force both governments to acknowledge what's really happening. It's an admirable goal. How do you propose to achieve it?" Nix activated another section of the display, showing a detailed schematic of what appeared to be a space station. "This is Meridian Prime, the Syndicate's primary coordination facility. It's where they maintain the communication networks that allow them to manipulate intelligence on both sides. If we can capture it intact, we'll have proof of everything financial. Records, communication logs, operational plans. That facility is protected by both human and Catharian defense forces, Zephyra observed. Approaching it would be suicide. Not if we had inside knowledge of both defense networks, Marcus said. Someone with current access codes and tactical intelligence? The implication was clear. They wanted her to provide the Catharian security protocols that would allow them to penetrate the station's defenses. In exchange, they offered ... what? Truth? Justice? An end to a war that had already claimed millions of lives? And if I refuse, then you're free. Then you're free to leave, Marcus finished quietly. We won't force you to betray your people, but we hoped you might want to save them instead. Zephyr studied the holographic display, her tactical mind automatically analyzing approach vectors and defensive positions around Meridian Prime. The station was heavily fortified, protected by overlapping fields of fire from both human and Catharian patrol fleets. A direct assault would be suicide, just as she had said. But the schematic showed vulnerable points maintenance ports, communication, raised docking bays that might be accessible to a small infiltration team. The security codes change every 72 hours, she said finally. Even if I provided current protocols, they would be useless within days. Which is why we need to move quickly, Nix interjected. The next supply convoy to Meridian Prime departs from Sector 12 in 60 hours. If we can intercept it, modify the cargo manifest, we could smuggle a team aboard, and then we gather evidence and broadcast it on every available channel, Marcus said. Force both sides to see what's really been happening? Before Zephora could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. Red warning lights bathed the chamber in hellish illumination as technicians scrambled to their stations. The main holographic display shifted to show aerial reconnaissance. Feeds human military transports approaching the complex from 3 different vectors. Ground-penetrating radar sweep detected us 20 minutes ago, one of the technicians reported. Estimated arrival time, 15 minutes. Marcus swore under his breath. How many? 3 full companies. Armor support. They're not here for a friendly visit. Nix moved to a weapons locker, withdrawing a Catharian energy rifle with practiced efficiency. Evacuation protocols. Already initiated. Non-essential personnel are moving to the emergency tunnels. Marcus turned to Zephora, his expression grim. Welcome to the Resistance's biggest weakness. We can't stay hidden forever. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as staff. Members secured sensitive equipment and prepared for either evacuation or siege. Zephora watched the preparations with professional interest, noting the efficiency of the operation and the obvious experience these people had with emergency relocations. This has happened before, she observed. 6 times in the last 3 months, Marcus confirmed. Someone keeps selling our locations to Human Command. We've been working our way through a list of suspects, but they always seem to be one step ahead. Or you have a transmitter you haven't detected, Zephora suggested. Catharian surveillance. Technology is more sophisticated than most humans realize. Nix looked up from her weapons check, explained neural implants. Microscopic devices that can be inserted during medical procedures or even routine vaccinations. They monitor bioelectric patterns and transmit location data whenever the subject experiences stress. Zephora moved to the display console, calling up medical schematics. Signatures nearly undetectable unless you know exactly what to look for. Marcus paled. We've treated dozens of patients here. If even one of them was implanted, then every location you've used has been compromised from the moment they arrived. Zephora highlighted specific neural pathways on the medical display. The good news is that the transmitters have a limited range. The bad news is that they've probably been tracking your movements for months. The sound of aircraft engines grew louder overhead, accompanied by the deep rumble of heavy ground vehicles. Through the facility's external cameras, they could see the first wave of human forces taking position around the mining complex's surface installations. Options. Marcus asked tersely. Fight and die gloriously, Nix said with dark humor, or run and die slowly. There is a third option, Zephora said quietly, but you will not like it. Both humans looked at her expectantly. Surrender me to them. Tell them you captured me during a routine patrol and were planning to turn me over to command for interrogation." She met Marcus's horrified expression with steady resolve. "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "We don't trade lives for tactical advantage. Even when the life in question belongs to an enemy commander, especially then." Marcus moved to another weapons locker, withdrawing a human assault rifle. "Besides, you're not just an enemy commander anymore. You're part of the team." Zephora felt an unexpected warmth at his words, though she pushed the emotion aside in favor of tactical analysis. "Then we need to consider defensive positions. How many people are still in the facility?" 43 reported one of the technicians, including medical patients who can't be moved. "And weapons? Not for maybe 20 fighters, Nix?" said. "The rest are medical staff and technical specialists." The numbers were not encouraging. 3 companies of human troops, roughly 300 soldiers, against 20 resistance fighters, defending a position that had been compromised by superior intelligence. Even with the advantage of defensive positions, the outcome was inevitable. "Tunnels?" Zephora asked. "Old mining shafts lead deeper into the mountain," Marcus replied, "but they're unmapped beyond the first kilometer. It's easy to get lost, and some of them are flooded or structurally unsound. It's better than staying here to be slaughtered. Maybe. But we'd be abandoning everything we've built here. Years of work, irreplaceable equipment, medical supplies that can't be replaced." Marcus checked his rifle's power cell with grim efficiency. Some things are worth fighting for. Zephora understood the sentiment, though her military training rebelled against such emotional decision-making. But as she looked around the command center at the humans and Catherians working together despite generations of mutual hatred, at the evidence of corporate manipulation that could end a war, at Marcus's determined expression as he prepared to defend what he believed in, she realized that some tactical situations transcended pure military logic. "Very well," she said, moving to the weapons locker. "If we're going to make a stand, we should do it properly." Nix handed her a Catherian plasma rifle, its familiar weight settling comfortably in her hands. "Like old times, Commander?" "Better than old times," Zephora replied, checking the weapon's charge level. "This time we know who the real enemy is." Marcus activated the facility's internal communication system. "Personnel. This is Dr. Hayes. We have incoming hostiles, estimated 15 minutes to contact. Medical staff and non-combatants proceed to evacuation tunnels immediately. Defense teams take assigned positions. This is not a drill." The command center emptied quickly as people moved to their assigned roles. Within minutes, only the core defense team remained. Marcus, Nix, Zephora, and 6 other fighters whose military bearing suggested extensive combat experience. "Defensive plan?" Nix asked. Marcus activated a schematic of the facility. "We'll try to breach through the main entrance. First hit's the obvious choice and the path of least resistance. And we've prepared some surprises there. It's a secondary breach." Points here and here, he indicated 2 smaller entrances with overlapping fields of fire. "The goal is to delay them long enough for evacuation to complete. And then we follow the civilians into the tunnels and hope we can lose them in the maze." It was not a sophisticated plan, but it had the virtue of simplicity. Zephora studied the defensive positions, noting potential weaknesses and alternative approaches that aggressive commanders might exploit. "They will use sonic charges to collapse sections of the tunnel system," she warned. "Standard human tactic when dealing with underground facilities. You have perhaps 30 minutes before the mountain becomes a tomb, and we'd better make those 30 minutes count," Marcus said. The first explosions came exactly on schedule. Shaped charges detonated against the main entrance, sending shock waves through the facility's structure. Emergency lighting flickered as dust rained from the ceiling. "Contact," reported one of the defenders over the communication system. Multiple squads advancing through the primary breach. Zephora moved to her assigned position, a defensive alcove that provided excellent fields of fire while offering protection from return shots. Through her rifle's targeting system, she could see human soldiers advancing in textbook formation, using cover effectively while maintaining coordinated fire patterns. Professional soldiers, she noted. Not the desperate militia fighters she had expected from a resistance movement. These were regular army troops with current equipment and solid training. "Something is wrong," she called to Marcus over the comm system. "These are not resistance hunters. They move like occupation troops. What's the difference?" Resistance. Hunters would be more cautious, more focused on capturing intelligence than eliminating threats. These soldiers are advancing like they expect to find military targets, not medical facilities. Marcus fired a controlled burst at advancing troops, forcing them to take cover behind debris from the blown entrance. Maybe they know about Nix, or you. Or maybe Nix's voice crackled over the comm. Someone told them exactly what they would find here. The implication was chilling. Human Command knew about the Resistance's intelligence-gathering operation. They understood the scope of what was happening in this facility. Then the attack was not simply about eliminating a medical station. It was about silencing witnesses to corporate conspiracy.